For those of you that I don't know, everyone, thanks for joining the webinar today. My name is Harman from Canary Technologies. Appreciate everyone taking the time to spend it with us today. We're excited to be hosting today's webinar. And a huge thank you to our panelists, David, Tony, and Dan, who I'll have introduce themselves in just a moment. For everyone, extremely relevant topic for today's market. And we received overwhelming interest from folks to join. So thanks to everyone for spending the time to talk about staffing shortages and kind of how to thrive in the future. I'll start off with an introduction, and then I'll hand it off to our panelists to do an introduction themselves as well. So my name is Harman Narula. I'm one of the principals here at Canary Technologies. I've been in hospitality for quite some time now. Previously, having also spent some time at Starwood Hotels and Resorts and Bain & Company, basically focused on hospitality and technology. For those of you that are not familiar with Canary, I'd be remiss if I didn't do a quick 30 seconds. So I will share a little bit quick tidbit about Canary Technologies. We provide a host of industry-leading operational guest-facing solutions. We work with thousands of hotels across the globe, a lot of big notable brands, as you guys can see here on the slide, it looks like. We work with some of the biggest brands in hospitality across a number of different solutions. We have two suites of solutions that we offer, one of which we call the guest management system, which you see here on the left side. That includes solutions like contactless check-in, contactless checkout, guest messaging, dynamic upsells, and digital tipping. And then the other suite here on the right side, which is our secure authorizations and payment suite, which includes our digital authorization solution and our digital contract solution. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to each of our panelists to introduce themselves as well. Perhaps, David, if you don't mind going first, you could give us a little bit of a quick introduction.
Sure. So my name's David Thompson. I'm the Chief Information Officer, VP of Technology for Pineapple Hospitality. We have our Staypineapple brand of hotels. There's 10 hotels throughout the United States. We focus on urban dense locations. And thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. Tony, do you maybe want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Tony Roumph. I'm the general manager here at the Hotel Zephyr in Fisherman's Wharf, San Francisco. I've gotten really familiar with the Canary technology over the last year or so, and obviously kind of experiencing some of our challenges in San Francisco as a market.
Great. Thanks, Tony. And Dan, do you mind rounding us out and maybe doing a quick introduction on you and your property?
Absolutely. Thanks, Harman. My name's Dan Smart, everyone. Thanks for joining this morning/afternoon. I'm down here at Dream Inn Santa Cruz, right here on the beach in Santa Cruz, California, about, I'd say, an hour and a half south of San Francisco. I've been here 10 years, 165 kind of beachfront property, and we've been with Canary, I think, 6 or 7 years. So we've been on board for a little bit of a while. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys, for the quick introductions. For today, we're going to try to keep it pretty casual. We have this topic in regards to staffing shortages and kind of what you all have been doing, what you all have been seeing. And so our aim today is that I have a few questions that we can start the discussion off with, getting a little bit of sense from each of you guys. And then, we do want to make sure to open it up for Q&A and see if, other hoteliers and folks also have some questions, and we can take it from there. So with that, I think we can kick things off predominantly first kind of chatting about kind of what's going on in the market. Just to set the stage a little bit in terms of what we're hearing from the market, what we're seeing in the market, what the data is showing in the market, is that basically here you'll see that we've seen employment has plummeted to some degree and it's still down pretty strongly. It's about 17% still from 2019 levels. Whereas occupancy has actually shot back up. And, we're continuing to hear this in the market. And I think before everyone jumped on for the webinar, David was mentioning this a little bit across his properties also. And the data is really showing this. So here on the right side, the blue bars illustrate kind of where employment is as compared to 2019 levels. So we see Q2 is somewhere around 80-85% as compared to 2019 levels. Whereas the red line is actually showing where occupancy is now sitting across the industry. And you can see occupancy is almost nearly back to about 100% of 2019 levels, which is pretty strong levels across the industry. And so hoteliers are trying to face this situation where they're trying to do more with less, right? They're trying to meet the consumer and guest demands, whereas they don't have as much of the labor. And so I'll turn it over to the panelists. Would love to kind of get your guys' thoughts on this. How have your properties been impacted by kind of the staffing shortage? Are there certain departments that are getting hit harder than others? And kind of what have you seen in the market? So maybe, I don't know, David, do you want to kick things off? Kind of let us know what kind of you've been seeing in the market and so forth?
Sure, absolutely. So a big one has obviously been the staffing as it relates to housekeeping department. We had to pare down. Being in urban dense locations, we were impacted a lot by the pandemic for a lot longer than some of the locations outside of city centers. And so attracting those staff back and then just not having as many available means that we've had to, for a limited time, we actually were reducing the max occupancy of the property when we had spikes. And then once we've kind of overcame that barrier, when people started traveling again and we were able to hire people on, we had to continue to reduce the frequency of stayover service that we were providing to our guests in order to adapt to the new level of staffing that we were able to continuously maintain. And that didn't stop at just housekeeping. Food and beverage operations that were closed for a while. And now we have limited days or meal periods that we're actually serving in order to be able to handle not having as many staff available or cooks to be able to actually make the food. And from a front desk perspective, that meant more or front desk shifts that were actually being taken by our GMs in some cases during the pandemic, especially, and then reduced hours during times when we still needed their help at the front desk. So less overlap between normal staff members and adding the GM to help be able to cover the desk during all the times that were necessary.
Yeah, this is something that we've heard, in my conversations with a lot of hoteliers, heard over and over again, was this idea around basically almost stifling, how many guests they could actually have on property at a time, just given kind of the staff shortages and so forth. Tony, I know on the ground as a GM, kind of what have you seen? What have you guys been experiencing at your property?
Yeah, I would say, at least in San Francisco, I wish your slide was accurate for where our rebound is. It's not quite close to that yet, but we've seen over the last few months some really positive signs and some big spikes in occupancy for us. I think we're a little bit maybe more unique in San Francisco, at least our property. We're a union hotel, so we had a lot of our hourly positions come back, which was fine for us when we were running 30% occupancy, but now we're spiking to 80%. And to David's point, a lot of my day is spent out at the front desk helping guests. Engineering, maintenance, that's been a big one for us. And even on a management side, some of those kind of career paths that maybe crossover into different industries, human resources and sales has been a tough one, which I've kind of seen from a lot of my colleagues in our market specifically. But yeah, obviously housekeeping and how we service that's been a challenge as well too.
Yeah, that's a lot of what we're hearing, very similar in terms of the different departments and so forth. Is that what you've been seeing, Dan? Is there certain departments that have been hit significantly harder? I know housekeeping has obviously been one of them. Other departments as well that have been hit pretty hard at your guys' property. How have you guys been thinking about that?
Yeah, it's been interesting. We had a similar reaction that David explained at the beginning of the pandemic, where it was limited hours and things like that. And we're lucky where we are as a beachfront hotel right off the Bay Area. I mean, I hate to say, we've been the highest occupancy we've seen in ever. So we're hitting records with occupancy now because our feeder market has grown. They're not going to further distances, they're coming closer distances. So my market has actually grown substantially. And it was funny to hear you say that, Tony, how maintenance has actually been a hard one. I've been at this hotel 10 years and maintenance has been the same group of employees, 5 of them, they're all solid. And that's actually been a harder one for us to fill. We've lost a couple of them because people are out and about cherry picking from anywhere they can, offering more money or better incentives. And so that's what the game we're playing right now, which is it gets tough. And what we've done in our location is we're a university town as well, University of Santa Cruz. So we work with them as much as possible and the community colleges. And so we've been, we're very seasonality here. Summer, when kids are out of school, we're sold out. And so we've had some successes working directly with the university to try to drive in those seasonal employees and get them trained up. So we've kind of come to the realization that you're not going to get someone with 5 years experience in sales, or 5 years experience in housekeeping or maintenance. You got to just find good people and train them, and hopefully they'll last. And one of the big things we've learned through some of the shortages is, someone interviews and they're good, you got to bring them in tomorrow. You can't have them start 2 weeks from now because they're going to get taken within that time frame. So that's been a big thing for our leadership team here is get them, interview them. If you like them, they're good people, bring them in 2 hours, to start their shift. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, and that kind of goes, that I think that's really helpful as we kind of think about some of the actionable insights that you guys may have come away with. Like, what are some of the tactics that you guys have found really effective? That's a really interesting one, I think, Dan, in regards to kind of the timeline and the pace at which you have to actually go through a recruiting process with individuals. But what are some of the other tactics that you all have found to be effective, or maybe some things that haven't been as effective in terms of recruiting and hiring across the board? I don't know, Tony, maybe you want to kick this off here. Maybe there's been certain tactics that you've seen.
Yeah, I think to touch on Dan's point, really going back and kind of looking at how we're posting jobs and really kind of selling that to the potential employee, and qualifications are a big one. I think where I might want a 4-year degree or 5 years of progressive experience in whatever department, I think we've really kind of gotten back to basics, that everyone has had to start somewhere. And I truly believe I can teach people systems and software, but you can't teach hospitality. So that's something that we've kind of looked really, if someone has a great smile, engaging, you can care about people. Might have looked the other way pre-pandemic because they didn't have the right amount of experience, but I think we've definitely broadened our pool of candidates of who we would be willing to look at. And then, yeah, really jumping quick and making an offer if you believe you have the right person too.
Yeah, I think changing kind of the bar in terms of how you evaluate candidates and what you're looking for, I think is a really critical piece that we've heard across the board with a number of hoteliers. David, how about you guys on your end? Any tactics that you have found to be pretty effective, or maybe some that haven't been effective, things that you guys have tried that just weren't really effective at kind of managing the staffing shortage?
Yeah, so it was about a year ago, we were doing hiring fairs. That was kind of when the hiring shortage really took effect for us in terms of competing with everyone to try to get staff back when travelers started coming out again. And we tried to do on-site hiring fairs, and they just bombed. They were horrible. People didn't want to come out to them. We were offering free drinks for people, come have a happy hour with us, learn about our properties, and we were just getting no uptake. And so this year we're doing something a little different. We're actually doing a virtual hiring event, which allows for more people from the corporate office to be able to be involved in it as well and to help the GMs. But we're hoping that the uptake is going to be higher with people being able to attend virtually, so that they don't have to travel, perhaps, because being in urban dense locations, it might be harder for them to come into a hiring event, especially during when traffic patterns usually are not favorable. So we'll see how that goes. We also, implemented doing retention bonuses to try to incentivize people and really focus on all of the benefit package. We have a pretty aggressive time off policy in terms of what we allow for people to have when they first get hired in healthcare, and just really trying to say, hey, the whole package, this is what you get as a Pineapple employee, and highlight some of those things.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. Really curious to see how the virtual hiring fair actually plays out. How about on your end, Dan? I know you mentioned a couple of things up front, but any tactics that have come into play? I think the other lens also is like, what tactics have you found being effective to actually manage kind of the occupancy that you guys are seeing if you don't have, even though you don't have as much staff? And I know David had mentioned maybe tapering down some of the F&B options that they had, maybe actually tapering down the occupancy at times. Curious to hear any tactics that you guys have seen to be helpful for your type of property.
Yeah, overall, and David said it too, is definitely 90-day bonuses or incentive bonuses after hiring. We've always had one in place, but we beefed it up as far as referral. So if you refer an employee, you get, $100 or 200, then after they successfully, complete their 90-day probationary period, you get another 200. So that's helped pretty well to bring in, friends and colleagues from outside of the hotel. And the one thing we've been doing a lot lately this year is cross-training people. We're at Union Hotel, similar to Tony, and so we have different job descriptions, but it works well if, one of the banquet servers is also willing to work at the pool for a day. Or they have 2 or 3 different, they can do reservations and front desk, or they can do reservations and valet. And so what we've done is just blatantly ask anyone, would there be any other job you'd be willing to do and train on? That way we can just pull them from where they are and move them to a busier area of the hotel. So that seems to work well. I think one of the other panelists mentioned it too, is how you change the job posting. That's been kind of interesting. I just did it this week. We had a reservation agent posted for about 2 weeks, got a bunch of candidates, 0 qualified candidates came through, waited about another week and changed it to reservation sales. Got a whole different pool of candidates that came in just by changing the title of the position. So that seems to help. And, bringing it into Canary and what Canary offers, like you said, we need to free up time. People need more time to clean rooms because they have 10 opposed to 8, for example. It's worked well at the front desk, specifically with contactless check-in. Traditionally, people would come in and probably have an average of a 7-minute check-in process, going over the hotel, credit card, ID exchange. Now with contactless check-in, they come in, they're done. They just hand in their keys. My front desk staff can spend only 2 minutes with them, really explaining the amenities of the hotel, upselling what we have to offer, and then moving them on. So the queue has gone down tremendously at our front desk.
I promise, disclaimer, I didn't ask Dan to say that, but I couldn't have pitched it better myself. So do appreciate the plug on that, Dan. And we'll get to technology too. So I think this is really helpful, and I imagine a lot of the folks that are listening in, they themselves are hoteliers, coming up with different tactics and so forth. So appreciate you guys sharing some of the community around things and building the community around things that you've tried that have worked and things that have not worked. One of the points that you mentioned, Dan, and moving forward with this, I think is, wages. And I think everyone, if you're listening or reading anything, you're hearing that inflation is basically all over the news at this point, right? And inflation is sitting up, 8, 9, 10%, who knows where it's sitting in terms of the next period, but certainly is on the rise and has been a big factor for folks. And interestingly, it's been a double whammy, right? So there's this staffing shortage that's occurring, and then wages have also been increasing for hoteliers. I think remarkably, there was a New York Times article that talked about this recently in terms of hospitality wages are up, 25% since 2019. And that's even outpacing just general wage growth that's at about 15 to 20%, which is pretty remarkable. And so given the increase in wages and the tough time hiring and retaining staff, how have you guys been combating that? Or, what have you guys seen? Are you seeing this in the market? Are you guys seeing this like bump up in wages? And then, what tactics or what are you guys doing in order to actually combat this? Maybe Dan, David, maybe if you don't mind, giving us some of your thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly we've seen the wage increases and have been needing to do that in order to keep pace with everybody who's in our market. And like Dan mentioned, utilizing technology where we can in order to automate what we can do. And part of that is certainly the transactional piece of the check-in process and also the checkout process. So in terms of being able to use a technology to be able to handle the financial transaction and be able to focus on the guest experience. Being a Canary customer, we've been utilizing your guys' product to do that. And that has allowed us to not necessarily have as many staff in the lobby. So it may not be just your front desk staff, but we're not so big that we actually have a concierge, but we might have somebody who is around the lobby doing cleaning and stuff, who would also be a point of contact for guests who may be asking questions. And we've been able to, reduce the number of total staff who are in the lobby areas, so that we're able to provide the guest services, asking questions about the areas that we're in. Being in urban dense locations, it's usually what's in the area of the hotels. Taking the transaction out of it and then knowing more about the customer. So being able to communicate with them and to anticipate their needs, and being able to do that using messaging back and forth. with the guest using text, which seems to be their preferred method of communication while on property, allows us to have multiple conversations with multiple guests at once, which really helps us to leverage that front desk agent to really be more effective that way, and to understand when the guest is actually going to be checking out. So maybe we can staff earlier in the morning and get to some of those rooms, because we know that a large portion of the guests are actually leaving because they were there for a conference and the conference ended and they're just staying that last night, and then they're all leaving in the morning. That allows us to optimize the labor of when they're actually coming onto the property to be able to do their job.
Yeah. Dan, how about on your end? Have you also seen the impact of inflation on wages? Are you guys seeing that bump up in your market as well? Is it making the ability to actually retain and hire talent more difficult?
Yeah, exactly. On the inflation front, yeah, I mean, we're in California too, right? We have some of the most, I think even my county's got some of the highest gas prices in the state. It's wild in the Bay Area. But what we've done is, just like our guests, we have a certain rate that our bar rate that we put out for people to, rent a room on a weekend in the summer, and they're pretty high. They're getting up there. So one thing we like to do is to provide value to our guests. We want to make sure our guests, they purchase a room for XYZ. Do they feel that it was their stay worth it? Was it valuable to them? And so we've kind of taken that same concept with our employees. How can we increase the value for our employees by working here? Maybe at $1 less than some other hotel, or $2 less. So we like to include, like weekly happy hours with all of our team. It's not alcohol, but it's like a big food and beverage set up every Friday. We'll invite everybody down to do things. We do lunch and learns, where we'll have lunch for all the staff here to do things, giving them some different flexibility on schedules and things like that they need to do there, and enhance and better, medical and dental plans and things like that. So we've kind of pivoted a lot in the past 2 years to just offer more to our employees as they come on board, less expensive insurance, for example. So we really try hard to increase the value of working here for our employees. New bike racks where people can pull and ride their bikes to work, and they've got a nice secure area, opposed to stashing them at the other end of the parking lot, doing different things like that. So that's one of our biggest opportunities right now.
I think that's a really interesting insight, that you guys are creating ways to attract folks outside of just their wages as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's allowing or providing significantly more benefits outside of just the wages. Seems to be an effective mechanism in terms of actually retaining or attracting and retaining new talent. Tony, how about on your end? What have you seen? I know tactical day to day, you're kind of in there, kind of seeing the market evolve and so forth. What have you been seeing in terms of the ability to attract and retain talent, given the effective wages going up?
Yeah, the wage increases that we've seen, just kind of industry-wide, especially in San Francisco, has made things a bit more challenging for us to recruit, just because we have a set contracted labor numbers. So we don't really have much opportunity to flex off that. But that's where I think we get creative, and not to completely shill here, but digital tipping has been a huge win for our team, and being able to look at things like that, where we all know no one really carries cash anymore, and our bellmen and our concierge weren't really seeing those tips come through. So those are big wins. I think we also get creative with some retention programs, but also really beefing up our upsell programs, where we can better incentivize the team to make more money that way, and positive name mentions on TripAdvisor and Google and things like that for the teams for the employees that we have currently in-house, where we can't really be flexible necessarily with their wages, but getting creative to boost that morale and also put more money in their pocket that inflation is sadly taken away from all of us too. So
yeah, it's an interesting point you raised. This has become, and I imagine a lot of the folks on the call are taking a look and thinking about it really strongly, is tipping has become, and digital tipping has become a nice critical factor lever for hoteliers to take a look at, in terms of providing a benefit almost to their staff members, in order to kind of drive wages up without necessarily impacting the hotel's bottom line. Do you mind giving us a little bit more color on that, Tony, in terms of the impact that you've seen across your property?
yeah, hard for me to necessarily quantify it, because the team's not necessarily open about the gratuities they were making pre-pandemic or what cash they were getting. But especially for the Bell team. It's been a huge win. It's been our housekeeping team a little bit of a slower uptake, but it's a relative minor monthly cost for us as a hotel to take on, and it's a huge morale booster. And I think it's good from a guest perspective too. Oftentimes, I've gone to a hotel and maybe the valet's open my door, or the bellman's taken my bags, and I reach my pocket and I have no cash on me, and it's just embarrassing knowing the industry that I'm in. I want to give them a tip, and I had no ability to. And digital tipping really allows for that opportunity to take place now.
Yeah. I'd be remiss, after all, we are a technology company. If, I'm a technologist, so just hearing your guys' thoughts on technology and the impact that it's been having on your properties and then the industry as a whole, right? Not even outside of, the solutions that you might be utilizing with Canary. Just curious. I'm sure a lot of folks on the call are interested to hearing your perspectives on, the impact technology can have or how you think about it. I imagine, David, you're probably, extremely well suited to think about this because you're probably thinking about technology day in and day out in your role. Maybe you can give us, a little bit of quick perspective on kind of how you're approaching, how you're thinking about it, the impact that you think it might have on the industry moving forward as well.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of us were trying to implement technologies, particularly contactless, at the beginning because we were concerned about the guest perception with the pandemic. But what we've really seen is that we need to leverage this technology to continue to gain efficiencies as an industry. The amount that you're spending per room in labor dollars is going up, obviously, with all the wages and everything. So how do you keep that in check? How does the owner ultimately benefit from the same level of retained earnings at the end of the day? And the only way to do that is with efficiency. So we've been, as an industry, I think, adopting technology at a faster rate than we ever have in order to try to figure out both the pandemic and then this efficiency. And so the more that we can do digitally with our guests and interact with them in the way that they want to actually be interacted with, in many cases, that allows us to leverage the staff to a greater extent. So it's not a one-to-one necessarily in terms of you're always talking to one guest at a time. You may be talking to multiple, and in some cases, that staff member may not be in the actual hotel. You might be able to leverage staff members from other areas that might specialize specifically in answering questions for a geographic area, as an example. And so those things are here to stay. We moved our call center staff and made them remote during the pandemic, as an example. And these people know our hotels intimately. We go have them stay there. They may live within those cities, but they're not necessarily at those properties anymore. And now they're out and can answer questions for guests from wherever they happen to be. So I see that that's probably going to be happening a lot more. And we're probably going to want more systems to be directly integrated. So the whole transaction. So it's hard for independents, which is what our hotel group is, in order to get necessarily keys cut. But I see that being integrated in and going, hey, the guest needs to be able to do that piece of it too. We need to be there for the questions, and we need to be there for either the human interaction or the digital interaction for them. But the transaction piece, we really want to step away from. And just like kind of the airport does, we see that continuing to increase in adoption.
Fantastic. So I'm going to actually start taking some of the questions from the Q&A. Although I have a ton to ask, I think some of these, I imagine it's what's on folks' mind. And this question just came in, and I think it's in response to what you were saying, David, but I think it's actually a really good one for the entire group in terms of how do you think about the efficiency for mobile check-in? Specifically, do you also feel like it hurts the guest experience? So I know actually all of your properties, David, Dan, and Tony, are utilizing mobile check-in. So maybe you can give us a little bit of sense in terms of how you think about efficiency and your perspective in terms of, if you do think it's hurting any sort of the guest experience as well. Dan, maybe if you don't mind giving us a little bit of your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we integrated the mobile check-in right out of 2020. I think it was September, right in 2020. So we jumped on pretty quick because we started looking for that technology right away in April, May, when is the height of the pandemic. And our guests have really taken to it. You know, we look at metrics of how many people use the contactless check-in or who don't. And one thing we've done is, you're right, there's a lot of us that have been in the industry for a while, and we strive on personal interaction with people. We want to ask questions. We want to talk to somebody and learn more about it. And what the contact list has done is it's just given us more time to talk to people. That's the thing I love most about it. As I mentioned before, someone can tell us when they're checking in, which is key. So now we know they're coming at 12 or 2. So then we can even make that arrival experience even better for them to hopefully have a clean room. But then to take that whole transaction time out of the way and just spend time talking to the guests. Why are you here? What do you want to do while you're here? Do you want to visit the amusement park or go to the pool? What time do you want restaurant reservations? Before, we didn't have time to do all of that. You would take credit cards, IDs, you go through that whole process, get approval, smoking closet, all the stuff you had to do with waivers, and then you'd spend 30 seconds on the hotel itself. Now we can spend all that time about the hotel, and I think our guests have really enjoyed that.
That's fantastic to hear, Dan. How about on your end, Tony? How do you think about efficiencies, right? At the hotel level, when you guys have implemented a number of these solutions that folks are asking about, also, like, I guess, how do you even think about efficiencies? And they specifically, this individual specifically asking about, how did you think about the guest experience?
Yeah, I think the example I like to give, at least to start off from the online check-in experience, someone like myself, I have to talk and be social for a living. When I'm on vacation, I don't necessarily want to deal with anyone. Give me my keys and let me go up to my room. And if I have a couple of questions, I'll ask. But my dad, when he checks in, he wants to talk to the front desk agent for 15 minutes and then head over to the concierge. So I think this technology really makes a traveler like myself happy, because I'm getting what I want. I'm getting my keys, I'm getting up to my room, and it's also freeing up the front desk team to actually spend more time with that traveler that's like my dad, that wants the more immersive check-in experience. I also think from an efficiency perspective, for the most part, 11 to 2 is typically downtime for us, and maybe you're running reports, but you really don't have too much to do at the desk. But when you start seeing those online check-in comes through, you're cutting keys, you're putting notes into Opera, and it's really switching from what maybe be that 3 to 4 p.m. rush of people, where you have now 3 hours to spread out all those online check-ins, and it really helps balance the time in the day a lot better as well too.
Got it. Great. Appreciate that. I can move on to see some of these other questions that are coming in. Well, this one's interesting. Housekeepers have been hard to hire and retain. How have you guys been able to increase housekeeping? Oh, sorry about that. How have you all been able to increase housekeeping productivity? Is there anything specific around wages as well that you've been able to do? Anyone want to jump in and take that one first?
I can take that one. You might as well. Housekeeping's tough, right? That's one of the hardest departments to hire. They work very hard. We celebrate our housekeepers quite a bit here, as our back of house. And one thing we've really done, I have housekeepers, and some of you might have the same, that have been here 35 years, very long time. And so number one, we also lean on our housekeepers to recruit friends and industry people to come in to join the housekeeping team. That's the first. Next, we really just listen to what their needs are. As I talked about before, what do they need? Do they need new sweater vests when it starts to get cool in the fall? Do they need we got all new vacuums for everybody. We looked at their carts, we looked at all their equipment, and really just wanted to see what are their needs, from cleaning supplies to just in the break room to have coffee all day. And so we've added a lot of that in there. And what that has done is it's then given them much more of a comfortability or a happiness to share their job and what they do, to then go out and recruit people for us. And so we really just have our GM sits down with, a department line level employee every month to really learn about what they're seeing and what their needs are. And we try to follow up and execute, and then make sure they know that we did execute it and see the execution to really help the retention go and drive more employees coming in.
That's fantastic. On the efficiency side, anything you all have seen in terms of increasing housekeeping efficiency?
I can hop in on that one. I think like many, we stopped stayover service, and very early on, that was probably our biggest complaint from guests. We went back to standard stayover service pretty early on, which obviously brought more housekeepers back into the fold and obviously hurt our bottom line a little bit. I mean, from technologies like Hot Sauce to Alice, I think all those are really helpful, communicating with the housemen and even running Canary messaging through those systems. But I think one of the biggest things for us is the digital checkout. Now, instead of my supervisor or manager going to check out every due out room, we have a decent amount of uptake going straight through Canary of actual due outs. And while I can't prove it, I truly believe those are the guests that most likely would have never have checked out in the first place. And we're going door to door to find out if they ever left. I really think that's been a big help. And we work, I'm sure, like most hotels do, off a credit system for our housekeepers. We're actually pretty close at maximizing our full daily credit per housekeeper too, which has been good to see financially. And it's also been somewhat good for them too, in my opinion, going back to stayover service. Cleaning 10 due out rooms every day is not a fun thing either. So I think it's been good for everybody all the way around.
Fantastic. Curious, just hearing about, you guys have, it seems like a lot of you are on the forefront. It seems like you've done a lot of creative and effective things at each of your properties. I know we're running out of time here. We're just about hitting up at the end of the webinar, but I did want to give each of you an opportunity, maybe really helpful for everyone that joined the webinar today. Your thoughts in terms of, kind of the future trends, what you think is here to stay. I know, David, you started to hit on some of this. What do you see happening in the market over the next, maybe year, 2 years, 3 years? Any sort of future thoughts in terms of how hospitality is evolved? Maybe there's changes that have been made that are here to stay. But maybe some of your general thoughts that we can help wrap up on in terms of what we're thinking about, what you guys are thinking about, or what you believe is kind of here to stay in the future and so forth. David, do you want to maybe kick things off on that?
Sure. So I think more and more the communication with the guest and the leaving the guest key in the room and just leaving is something that we as an industry need to figure out how to prevent from happening in order for us to be proactive. So like Tony had mentioned, that becomes a real issue for the housekeeping department, that all of a sudden at noon or whenever your checkout time is, you're knocking on doors. And that's just an inefficiency that we've kind of allowed as an industry. If we can somehow incentivize the guest in some way to be able to give us that information so that we get a higher uptake on the number of people that are letting us know proactively when they're leaving the room, I think that'll be a huge efficiency gain that I think we need to figure out how to crack as an industry, and that the check-in piece is definitely here to stay. This has been a big efficiency gain and allows us to interact with our guests, like Dan had mentioned, a lot more, and spend less time on the transaction. So that process has really been streamlined during this time. So that's definitely staying.
Fantastic. How about you, Dan?
One thing we thought was kind of funny is, and I'm sure we all did this, is we all reverted to QR codes, right? So you have QR codes. A lot of the hotels, restaurants, you go, there's menus, all QR codes. And so we spent a lot of time right at the beginning putting menus on QR codes, programming on QR codes, any and everything you could put on a QR code. Our compendium, we call it our daily dreamers, all on a QR code. And we did that for a while. And then once we kind of came out of, where people were worried about touching things in the rooms, we're like, let's bring back all of our good menus and things. And my operations team was giving me a hard time. They're like, well, Dan, we've already trained all of our guests how to use QR codes. That was hard. That was brutal, to try to, you got to hold your phone up, and so we kind of learned that I like the QR codes now. I can pull it up everywhere. And so we're keeping the QR codes, but we're also now doing regular, paper menus, etc. But we're keeping both aspects, because there is still always going to be that group that doesn't want to handle everything that other people have potentially touched. And what we've learned through is, as you said, going into the future, is we've always been surgically clean, is what we've always said, even before, the pandemic. We need to be surgically clean everywhere. But now our guests are going to continue to expect that. I think people love to see a hand sanitizer right by the elevators, or your remotes in a plastic Ziploc bag, for example. I think that's something that's going to stay for a while. And I think it's good. It's put everyone on more of a high alert of being a lot more clean. We were already clean, but now we've taken it to a whole nother level. And I think that's going to stay for a while.
Yeah, that's a great one. Tony, you mind rounding us up?
Yeah, I just think where things go, I think what I've really noticed, especially over the last year, I mean, guest expectations have only grown, and unfortunately my room rates and occupancy hasn't. So it's really kind of like David touches on, how do you find those efficiencies, and where do you go from there to make sure you're being profitable? I think one of the big things is really integration of your systems, and kind of like different departments may not come together, or things are kind of just lost there. I really want to see one hub where everything really kind of talks to each other, and get that figured out from a systems perspective, and have it just live in one place, and really minimizes any issues that the guests experience, but also maximize what we can do from service at a hotel perspective.
Fantastic. Well, I know we are just bumping up. We're a couple minutes over. I want to give a really big thank you to David, Dan, and Tony for joining us today. Hopefully folks found this to be really insightful and helpful. Appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy days to join us. And thanks to everyone that also joined to listen in. Here at Canary, we're here to help and talk to folks about the different solutions that we can offer. So more than happy to do so for anyone that wants to ping via the email address that you received your invite from. But otherwise, thank you so much, David, Dan, and Tony, for joining us today. Really great to hear your insights and perspectives.